Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trowel Talk Live. My name's Julianne Labreche, and I'm your moderator for today. Just a reminder, if you have any questions today, please type them into the chat function of Zoom. Adair Hooken is standing by to direct them to our speaker once the talk is done. We're really pleased today to welcome Heather McDonald, who will be talking about fall bulbs. Heather is a master gardener who's studying for a horticultural certificate at the University of Guelph. She has a special interest in trees, pollinator gardens, and sustainable urban agriculture. So over to you, Heather.
Thanks very much, Julianne. Welcome, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving to all. It's an absolutely gorgeous day and very enticing for anyone who's got the time to do any gardening today. I'm going to talk a little bit about planting bulbs in the fall to get those beautiful spring blooms. So that's why I've called it Beyond Tulips, because there are many, many other bulb-based flowers and other types of edibles, if those people like to plant some of those as well, that are that grow out of a bulb. So I'm going to talk a bit about some suggestions for spring blooms, because there are hundreds. So I'm just going to offer you a few. How to plant them, suggestions for where to plant them, and thwarting those little critters that we all have running around in our gardens: squirrels, chipmunks, rabbits. Some people have deer. There's always something trying to get at those tasty bulbs. So I will have some suggestions about thwarting those critters as best as we can. And then finally, what happens when the spring bulbs are finished? Some of them do bloom well into spring and early summer. But beyond that, normally we start to see yellow leaves and kind of looking tired and not very nice in the garden. So what do we do when the flowers are actually finished? So planting in the fall is a wonderful time, obviously, because it's cooler. There are less bugs around to infest things. And a lot of our little critters are getting ready to hibernate. So they're gathering food. They're not as prevalent. They're still around, but they are busy trying to squirrel away food, if you don't mind the pun. We can talk first about when we can plant bulbs, and a lot of them can be planted right up until the first frost. If it's a light frost, sometimes you can plant even after that if the ground is not hard yet. The best thing to do, because we have so many microclimates here, is to look at the frost dates for your particular area rather than just say zone, because it very often will dictate times that are different for you as opposed to me where I live. We really want to get those bulbs in a few weeks ahead of that frost date if possible, just to give them time to root. That makes a really big difference on the success of the bloom for the spring. If you want to have bulbs throughout your growing season, then you want to look at early spring, mid and late spring. When you buy bulbs, they will indicate when the bloom time is. And if you get a selection of those, then you'll have continuous blooms right up until summer, which is lovely. The reason why we like cool soil is because the bulbs root best in the cool soil. And then once they do get rooted, they will have natural ways that keep them from freezing. So that's why fall planting works so very well. You want to water your bulbs after planting them a little bit to start the rooting process. But what you don't want to do is put any fertilizer in with the bulb, especially bone meal. Bone meal attracts critters, not only squirrels and other animals that are looking for edibles, but even dogs will dig them up because they can smell the bone. Fertilizer will also burn the bulb, so you really don't need to put anything in there. If there's been lots of rain, then you don't even have to worry about the watering, but a little bit of water when you put them in just helps them get that rooting process started. There are a few bulb suggestions. Again, there's so many, and it really has a lot to do with what colors you might like. How much of an area do you have to plant bulbs? So for example, some are really, they really like to spread out because they're more of a ground cover. So you've got the glory of the snow, which is beautiful. You've got star flowers, which also spread out. Crocus will naturalize, as will daffodils. So a lot of those are perfect for mass planting. So early spring means that they will come up even through a light snow. They'll be poking through. So these are just a very few suggestions. Winter aconites, hellebores. There are a lot of tulips that are especially bred for coming up in the early spring. So do check when you buy bulbs, because these are important indications of when to plant. Gorgeous, gorgeous colors. And the colors now for so many of the spring flowers, they've been hybridized, and now the color choices are almost endless. So you have wonderful choices for early spring blooms. Then there's mid to late spring. So again, other species of daffodil, jonquil, hyacinth, grape hyacinth, windflowers, all kinds of irises, more tulips, fritillaria, alliums. The double tulips are especially stunning. They look like peonies. They're just gorgeous. So you, again, the color choices and the types of plants that you can get via bulb are almost endless. And it's really a personal choice as to what you choose. They're all beautiful, in my opinion. Now dealing with those pesky critters. So once you've got your bulbs, the first thing you want to do is make sure that you're planting them in the right spot for the amount of sun that they require. Obviously, if you want to bloom, you want to have that nice warm sun. So that's the first thing you want to check various places and see in your garden where they would best fit. Planting in between around flowers and small shrubs that come up later means that you'll have those blooms when everything else is still looking pretty dead. And that's what you really want. You want those gorgeous flowers coming up when there's nothing else blooming yet. Lots of people have rock gardens. So again, rocky areas are great for those smaller sort of ground cover species like Siberian squill, starflower, or muscari. Really, the idea is that if you mass plant something, so not just one or two, but put them all in the same area, not too far away from each other, looking at the recommendations for soil depth and spacing as your guide will be most effective for the beautiful color that you want to get. And of course, make sure that you plant your bulb the right way up. And for some people, that sounds kind of funny, but actually it's easy to mistake certain bulbs. So you always want to look at the bulb, the basic shape of the bulb, and look for the bottom of the bulb, which often will have little white roots or kind of a hairiness to it. And that is your indication that that's the root end of the bulb. So make sure you put them the right way up. And of course, always make sure you follow the soil depth and spacing that's provided when you buy bulbs. Now here's where I found a method that so far works for me in terms of discouraging those diggers that I have around from pulling up my well-placed and lovingly planted bulbs. So two things that I would recommend. Number one is getting your plastic chicken wire. And I like the plastic one because it's easy to cut with scissors and will not cut anything, including you when you use it. It's lightweight. So once you plant your bulbs, you put a piece of the plastic chicken wire over the area and make sure you cover the whole area that you've planted, okay? And then layer on mulch on top of that. And if necessary, put a few rocks here and there and weigh it down with the rocks. It makes it really hard for the squirrels and the chipmunks to dig up those bulbs. So far, I have foiled the ones in my area, and I'm quite pleased with that. So I feel like I'm going to have some bulbs coming up in the spring. There are some flowers that are actually pest resistant. Now I say pest resistant because there's no such thing as pest proof when it comes to flowers. I mean, that a lot of them are just going to be, even if they're not dug up, they might be chewed at, but there's certain ones that actually release a toxin. It's an alkaloid, which is very distasteful to a lot of creatures, or they don't particularly smell good, so the creatures tend to leave them alone. So I've included a few of those as suggestions: daffodils, allium, hyacinth, grape hyacinth, fritillaria, snake's head, glory of the snow, snowdrop, Siberian squill, and Spanish bluebell. So those are typically flowers that critters tend to leave alone in favor of something else. So you could try some of those. And again, the colors that are available are amazing. They're not just purple and white. There are pinks, there are yellows, just gorgeous colors. So those are something to consider as well. What to do when the flowers are over? Typically, when we have tulips, for example, they have these very big floppy green leaves, which look okay until they start to turn yellow and die down, and then they look quite ratty in the garden. So once they've yellowed, you can just trim them right down to make them neat. Daffodils and crocus naturalize, so they will spread on their own and they will increase in that area. So if you find that things are a little out of control, in about 5 years or so, you can dig them up and replant them. Just replant them right away, just space them out a little more. There are some bulbs that are very frost tender. So the first sign of frost sometimes will kill them. Flowers such as dahlias and begonias should be dug up, as opposed to the other bulbs, which you can actually leave in the ground. It's not a hard and fast rule that you have to dig up bulbs every fall. Typically, if you look and you see that your bulbs are actually disappearing, or they're looking damaged or chewed, then once the foliage has died back, you can dig them up. So when you dig them up, you brush off any of the soil that's still stuck to the bulb, and you let them dry out in a box with a bit of paper or dry peat moss, and then keep them cool over the winter until spring, and in the dark, out of the light, because light will stimulate growth. Now, when I say keep cool, typically it's between 60 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit, or between 15 to 18 degrees Celsius. So if you have a garage that's insulated or a shed that's insulated, you may want to check the temperature, but it's probably going to be just at the right temperature. If you do not have an insulated area, such as a garage, don't let them freeze, because things will freeze. Otherwise, you can leave them in the ground and they will come up again beautifully next spring. When you do see them starting to come up in the spring, remove that chicken wire and remove a little bit of mulch if it's heavily layered with mulch, so that they have a chance to come up and reach the sun. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Heather, so much. We do have some questions that have actually come up, and some people have been answering some of the questions, but I'm going to ask you anyway. When you talked about fertilizer, not fertilizing, somebody asked about Mikey, and is it recommended for bulb planting? Mikey being, the mycorrhiza.
Right. Yes. It really doesn't seem to matter. It's not high on the list of what you have to do when you plant a bulb. You can certainly use a little bit of it, but it's not required. Okay, it's not high on the list of, yes, you must do this when you plant the bulb. So it's really, it has a lot to do with the soil quality that you're planting the bulbs in. So for example, if you have a nice rich soil, it's probably not necessary to do anything when you first plant the bulbs. If you have to amend your soil every year, then maybe, yes, maybe you do want to put some in. But again, be very judicious with anything that you add when you're planting that bulb, because the bulb has to have that chance to root, and you don't really want to interfere with that rooting process.
Great, thank you. There's a question regarding fish emulsion for fertilizing, and I think this was recommended a few sessions ago. Person's been having difficulty finding it. Somebody answered, Karen answered that she found it at Richie's in Stittsville. Doesn't know the brand. Do you know much about fish emulsion, Heather?
Not in the sense where it can be purchased. Again, it's another type of let's say an enrichment of the soil that works quite well. It's been around for a long time. It's not new. And again, it's just a question of whether or not you feel your soil needs a little bit of a boost because of the quality of it, the general quality of your soil. So that's really why we want to add things like emulsion and compost tea and things like that. It's always good to boost the soil because the plants are taking a lot of the nutrients out, and we want to put them back in a natural way rather than use a chemical. So if you know that you have to amend your soil every year, especially because perhaps you have a lot of clay or a lot of sand, then adding things like the fish emulsion or the mycorrhiza is great.
Great. There's a question regarding the depth of planting. I have a question. I had read that you can plant tulip bulbs as far as a foot deep and they still come up and the squirrels don't get them. Now, I don't know about, you might want to comment on that, but there's a question here on the same subject of, do you consider the mulch as part of the depth planted?
I do not. No. Mulch to me is something that protects the plants. It increases the moisture retention. It sometimes works to guard against weeds growing. So really, it's not an amendment to the soil the way a fertilizer would be. In terms of planting depth, I think you really have to go by the suggestions from the nurseries, because a foot deep is pretty deep. But again, depending on where you live, perhaps that's best for you. But I would say that that's pretty deep, and chances are sometimes the bulb may rot before it gets a chance to grow through. So if you're worried about critters, then try the chicken wire deterrent and see if that works. It might just do the trick.
Great. And do the critters continue to dig older bulbs that are in the ground from previous years, as far as you know?
Well, they'll always try. They're always looking for food. And if you've ever watched them, sometimes they're randomly digging. It seems like they're randomly digging. And when they find something, it's like, yay, I've found something. But I think it doesn't matter how old the bulb is. If it's edible, they'll dig it up and eat it, or they'll try. So it has nothing to do with whether the bulb is new or not. If it's a viable plant and it's coming up every year, then they're gonna try and dig it up.
Right. Actually, regarding depth, Josie made a comment that I plant large tulips about 8 inches deep and they don't seem to get dug up, and I guess they don't rot either. But I guess, as you pointed out, it might be whatever works in your garden and best to cover them. Yeah.
For example, clay holds a lot of water. Okay. And a lot of the Ottawa Valley is clay. So unless you live in Sandy Hill, in which case you have a little more sand. But for example, if you do have a very heavily clay soil, at some point you're going to hit that clay when you dig, and it's going to be very, very wet and damp. So I think that the sort of rule of thumb is dig down, first of all, to where the bulb should go. So little bulbs don't go as deep as the bigger ones. Okay, that's just a basic rule. And then secondly, 6 inches is typically the average for tulips. 8 is okay too. I think a foot's too deep, especially if you are getting close to the clay, because again, it's a matter of making sure that it's, yes, protected and doesn't rot and has a chance to come up. So
I just wanted to mention that there was a question about a previous one of these talks regarding soaking pots with soil in insecticidal soap. And this is from Sandra. Sandra, I would suggest you send this question to the Master Gardeners of Ottawa-Carleton, and they will answer it. I don't think this is for Heather, but just wanted to let you know that that's how you can get answers to questions like that.
Yes, just to on that topic, okay, because it triggered something in my memory. Some places, if you choose to dig up some bulbs because they're not frost hardy, or you want to dig them up because you're just fed up of having critters dig holes. Some places recommend that you dust them with a fungicidal powder. I don't think that's really necessary, because if you let them dry out a few days and remove the soil, don't peel off any of the papery outer leaves of the bulb, and just put them in clean, dry paper in a cardboard box, you should be fine. That's as far as I'll go with that. Yeah.
That's great. Another good question. We've been having an unusually warm fall. I assume that the timing of bulb planting is different this year. Can you comment, please?
Yeah. Again, you can plant right up until the first frost, and sometimes even after the first frost. So this weather is just wonderful to be planting bulbs. I've just planted a bunch myself, and it just means that they're going to have that much more time to develop their little root system before the cold weather does hit. So because our climate has changed so much, checking the frost dates, the predicted frost dates, because of course they're not exact, but it just gives you an idea of when you might encounter a frost. And I think our season is extending a little bit. So plant away. That's my opinion about that.
That's great. And I wondered if you might comment on color themes. I mean, it's obvious there's a wide range of colors.
Yes, well, again, it really has to do with your personal favorites. So for example, I love purple. So I've got purple, no matter what else I've got purple. So I tend to pick things that are in sort of the purple, pink, and then white. I don't have as much yellow as some people do have, but again, I'm looking at, pollination choices as well as personal color favorites. So the Siberian squill, I have that because it's a gorgeous purplish blue, and the tulips that I would choose are always based on sort of fuchsia, purple, and maybe some white and pink. And again, when you group those together and you contrast them with a white, it's just stunning. So I think that's really part of personal taste. And then I would say choose one contrasting color to make everything pop.
That's lovely. You were talking about what to do when things start to die back after they've flowered. I remember being told to put, something tall in front of it so it would fall back and you wouldn't see it. But it isn't all that easy to let those leaves go down.
Right. So basically, once the flowering has actually finished, okay, and then you're left with a stalk and some green leaves. yes, you can't always put something in front of it. It's not always possible, but especially if basically what you have is a border. Okay, so part of it is accepting that you're going to have a little waiting period before you can trim those leaves down. But once they start to look like they're dying back and turning a bit yellow, it's okay to trim them down to the level of the ground, and then they will disappear. So the only other thing you could do would be to put annuals in front of them or something. But it depends on where you've planted them and how much it bothers you, actually.
Right, right. There is a question that actually is going to be covered next week, and it regards to garlic bulbs. So just to say to Eva, no fertilizing at the time of planting doesn't apply to garlic. Well, actually, I'm speaking next week, and I'm still doing research on this subject. So I'll answer your question next week. Thank you. And I guess you touched on something, pollinators. Do pollinators like bulbs? I don't see them on my tulips very much. I just wondered.
Not on the tulips, but there are other flowers that are definitely attractive to pollinators. So very often when you buy the bulbs, it may show either by a visual little picture, or it will say, attractive to bees. And certainly crocuses are one, and they are our first, winter, spring flower that will pop up, and bees like them, because the next one that comes are dandelions, as you know, and a lot of people are ranting about getting rid of dandelions, but they are an important source of food for our bees. So crocuses are one, for example, and very often when you plant the very early spring ones, it may indicate on the package that they're attractive to bees.
Oh, that's terrific. That's terrific.
Important. Yeah.
Heather, I think we've come to the end of our questions, and I'll turn it back over to Julianne then. Thank you.
Okay, well, at this point then, Heather, I'm going to thank you for that really fun and practical talk. What better time of year to talk about bulbs than right now? I just put my alliums in last week, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them pop up in the spring. So thank you so much. And
very welcome.
Adair, we'll look forward to seeing you next week talking about garlic. And thanks for our listeners who tuned in this week. Please join us again next week, next Tuesday, for Trowel Talk Live.